Hey everybody, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I'm your host, G1. As always, I hope you're having a good week. It's been a busy one for me, but we've got a lot to cover this week, so just going to jump right into it. So first of all, overall theme of the show is going to be back on the protest in Chicago and Portland. I do have something else to kind of touch on at the end that I want you guys to go look at, but let's get to the protests again. And I say again because I know it seems like I'm making this topic a habit, but things keep happening and escalating, and I don't know how much you guys follow some of these stories. If you're not paying as close attention to it as maybe you should, but I want to give you my take on them because I think these are important signposts and waypoints on the road that we all need to be keeping track of. So before I get into the specifics, do yourself a favor, go over and hit both Forward Observer's YouTube channel as well as S2 Underground. They've both been getting into this topic for a couple of episodes, so you'll do good to go get updates from them because those guys cover things pretty thoroughly, pretty heavily. The live stream the other day from Forward Observer was good stuff. Now, let's hit the high points. So this week we have further escalation of the situation in Chicago. But let's go to Portland. It's been kind of business as usual. Last week I mentioned that there were a couple of nights of relative peace and calm. Well, over the last weekend that went right out the window. And it's been just kind of rinse and repeat for the last few days. There was, over the weekend, a very humorous naked bike ride protest in Portland, whereby mentally ill leftist commies, which is kind of a redundant statement, but anyway, they rode their bikes into a major thoroughfare, which runs through the city, and jumped off the bikes and laid themselves out in the road, all the while being naked from the waist down. It was raining, so they were wearing raincoats, because, that makes sense. But it was disgraceful. Just fleshy bits openly displayed out there for anyone and everyone to be assaulted with and forced to look at. True horror. No Hollywood filmmaker can capture that in a jump scare for Halloween. Just terrible. It was embarrassing. But that tactic is apparently being replicated. And let me tell you kind of how this goes down. If someone is nude walking around at a protest, then the people who are live streaming that protest, those events, they are forced to keep their cameras off of that person. If they don't, then they will likely get reported on whatever platform they're streaming on, and their live stream will get shut down. So it's a way for these deranged lunatics to keep people from seeing what is, really taking place, really going on down there at these locations. And yesterday there was some arrest that happened during the daytime, which is normally fairly quiet in Portland at least. But the streamers had to be very careful because there's this woman walking around with her shirt off. So that is a tactic that they're probably likely to be using, at least in Portland, more in the future. On a higher level, we have the National Guard still being held off both in Portland and in Chicago because of these judges' orders. The one in Portland, the judge says she sees no reason to deploy the National Guard. And I went into this last week and I asked, well, who is the commander-in-chief? If a judge can just pull the plug on deployments when they see fit. And this injunction is still in effect for a few more days at least, maybe another 5 or 6 days, I think is what it was. But at any rate, one wonders if during a hurricane or, a big wildfire in California, for example, if a judge could just say, hey, I don't see any reason that the Guard should be deployed to help out with that disaster. So I'm going to issue an injunction to prevent that from happening. You wonder if that would get any traction. Would that fly? I don't think so. And that's pretty much this week from Portland. So, we'll be watching that go down over the coming weekend. We'll see how that goes. It's always entertaining if you can catch the live streams that are on YouTube of that stuff. Now, Chicago, on the other hand, once again has escalated. To begin, the ICE facility there in Broadview, which I think is the name of the little township or town that the facility is actually in. It's a suburb of Chicago. They went to court to try and force ICE to remove this secondary fence line that the feds had installed across the road, which allowed ICE to better control access to their facility and prevents the protesters from kind of pinning in the vehicles. The way the setup there is there is a gate and a kind of secured area at this facility, and ICE would have to line their vehicles up, and that gate would open up, and the protesters were right there. And they would have to basically force their way out from the beginning, like right at the gate. So what they did is they went out in the road and kind of went about 20 or 30 yards to the left and further to the right, and they put in these temporary fences, and that lets them actually get all their vehicles out of the facility and close that gate again, kind of get lined up in a little bit better position so that they can exit and control that entrance and exit of the facility. Well, of course, the city got a judge to issue an order to ICE that they had to remove this fence. The city says, well, that fence has been put up on municipal property, and it was put up illegally. So once again, we have judges overstepping the bounds here. This fence was installed temporarily to protect not only the ICE facility, but to keep the protesters from causing situations that require an escalation of force. Well, this judge says, nope, that fence has got to come down. Now, as of yesterday, the fence was still in place, and it has been doing its job. It's been keeping primarily the protesters back from the main opening, and their actions have been much more controlled right there around that facility. But the action has shifted away. The local PD, the state police, they've been there trying to keep the protesters out of the road. So the tactics of the anti-ICE people have evolved. Now, as I mentioned last episode, these anti-ICE people are following the ICE vehicles, the SUVs and trucks that they drive, and they're trying to block them in. They get cars in front of them and they stop, and then they get cars behind them and they stop, and they just block them on the road to keep them from moving. And then at that point they get out of their cars and they film this whole thing with their phones, and they start screaming and chanting, and there's just other insanity that takes place. And this has been going on for a couple of weeks, as I said on the last episode, and it resulted in at least one major incident that we talked about, and then several other smaller ones. Well, this week, yet again, we have an evolution of that tactic. Much of the area that ICE is operating in Chicago consists of block after block of row houses. Okay, these are generally smaller, older homes, and these streets, they're very close together, very densely packed, neighborhood areas in the city. And so this lends itself to the people who live in these neighborhoods being able to move very quickly from street to street. And we really, honestly have to give these people credit, the ingenuity here. This is smart what they're doing, even if it's wrong. These streets have formed these detachments of watchers who ride around on bikes and in cars, and when they see ICE, they box them in, and then they use whistles and chat groups and things like that on their phones to signal for streets that are all around, the groups that are on these streets right around the location, to converge on the area. And they're able to mass, 30, 50 or more protesters just in a very, very short amount of time. They get them on site and get them protesting very quickly. And we saw this happen on Tuesday. ICE is chasing two men who are convicted illegals. And what do I mean by that? They both already had deportation orders, which go back well into the Biden era. Okay, under the Biden administration, judges, and we're supposed to do what the judges tell us to do, right? The judges had ordered that these two men in separate cases should be detained and deported. And the Biden administration did not act on that. So ICE has found these two guys and somehow identified them. That part's unclear. I haven't seen any report of how that happened. They identify them and they are chasing them around in one of these neighborhoods. These guys are driving around in this kind of maroon SUV little vehicle, and ICE is chasing them. And as I said, so what happens is kind of unclear. We don't have a real good picture of all of this. There's some security camera footage out there, but not a real clear understanding of how this all happens. What the outcome was, though, is both of these SUVs being driven, the one by the illegals as well as the one being driven by ICE, end up crashing into one another and sustaining pretty significant damage. No one is apparently hurt, but the vehicles they're not moving, okay? They're going to have to be towed. Well, as this arrest is happening and the ICE guys are trying to, negotiate getting a truck out there, tow truck to tow their vehicles away, this area gets swarmed. Okay, these watcher groups, they go into action, they call their people, and 60, 70 protesters, maybe a little bit lighter numbers than that, but anyway, they converge on this crash scene, and they begin trying to free these two men who have been arrested. And this escalates to the point that more ICE agents have to start showing up. Chicago PD starts showing up. You end up with about 40 ICE agents there. They're almost a one-to-one match to the crowd. It's almost as many ICE guys as the crowd, plus Chicago PD. And it's still not causing the crowd to disperse or to back down. They continue try to push, try to encroach in on this crash scene and try to interfere with these guys being arrested. So the ICE agents end up throwing tear gas and smoke out, and they make multiple arrests of protesters who try and throw this tear gas canisters back at the ICE people. It was just complete madness. And this is happening more and more, and it's escalating more and more in Chicago. We've also seen at least one incident of this kind of tactic being used in Portland, so it's probably something that will be replicated. So what are we to make of this? I want to highlight kind of a disparity here, because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but if you are in one of these situations and they throw a tear gas canister out, ICE deploys a tear gas canister, if you pick that canister up and throw it back at ICE or any of the other federal agency, you will be arrested. End of story. We have seen this multiple times in Portland. You kick that canister back towards them, you pick that thing up and throw it at them, you are getting pinched. Now, I haven't seen it for people who kick the canister away, kind of out of the side, or there's been times when we've seen people put traffic cones on them or pour water on them or something like that to try to snuff the tear gas out. That doesn't garner the same kind of response. You pick that thing up or you kick it back towards ICE, you're getting arrested. So if they're doing that, I have to imagine that obstruction is the charge that they're using on this offense. I mean, it may be that they're saying that is, an assault or something like that, but it's at least got to be obstruction. And if you just browse YouTube, you can see just countless videos of police doing very questionable things and outright illegal things. And one of the charges that they almost always throw at people in these kind of things is obstruction. So riddle me this, why are the people who are literally blocking ICE vehicles, smashing them with their cars in some instances, or even just bumping into them, why are they not being charged and arrested with obstruction? Even if it's a temporary charge, it's just, boom, I'm getting out, I'm arresting you. If you don't move your car, you're getting arrested for obstruction. And boom, you pinch them, you take them out of the car, you put them in handcuffs, you take them downtown, and then turn them loose. Even if that is all that happens, it should cause them a lot of problems to take the ride and have to get their vehicles out of impoundment. I don't know why ICE isn't doing this, DHS isn't doing this. Maybe it's because local PD's not cooperating. They're not towing the cars or willing to process these people or anything like that. I think at a minimum you ought to test that out, okay? Arrest some of these clowns, just leave their cars in the streets for the local PD to deal with, something like that. I don't know, but there has to be some legal solution to this nonsense. And we have the governor of Illinois, Governor Pritzker, issuing statements that he and his team are looking into charging the ICE agents right now, or perhaps charging them after a Trump administration, for the actions that they're taking enforcing immigration law. So are we going to see President Trump have to issue a blanket pardon to ICE agents to go on top of the federal qualified immunity that they already have, just to avoid any of this kind of BS? When do we see some backbone from DOJ Barbie and Lokesh Patel? When is someone going to actually stand up to these people and stop them? Inform the governor, hey, there might be some charges pending for you and your mayors of these cities if you don't assist in putting a stop to this. So we have judges in league with these local and state officials, not to enforce the law, but to prevent the enforcement of the law. And this just puts to rest the idea that you're going to solve this problem through legal or normal legal means. You can't have all this nonsense running everything up to the Supreme Court. And even then, when the High Court slaps them down into their place, as has happened multiple times, they just get another judge to issue yet another injunction, and you have to go back through the whole process again. The system was not meant to function that way. The president must have the authority that is clearly given to him in the Constitution and in the law. This is a cornerstone of civil society. But I just do not believe this gets settled in a nice and legal packaged way. This is going to take an act by the feds that is likely going to have to be very drastic to shut this down, along with what I talked about last week. This is not going to be pretty. You're going to have to just grin and bear it. It's either that, or the feds are just going to have to turn a blind eye, and citizens are going to have to take things and do things on their own. Anyway, one more thing before I go this week. And this all kind of ties in together. I want you to go over to the Mothership, Western Rifle Shooters page. Follow the link in the description to that page. And see what Pete has posted over there. You should be doing that anyway. You should read his page every day. You should, pay the man off there for what he does, all the work that Pete puts in to the site. But there's a piece there today from Vox Day that references an article by Helen Andrews. And really, you owe it to yourself to go over and read this piece, because boy, does it put so much into clear focus. And it tracks very heavily with what I have kind of independently came to realize about the whole situation. Probably about a year ago is when I really started kind of thinking along these lines. The article is called The Great Feminization, and it is just so spot on, and it is filled with so many things that are eye-opening and clarifying, and any analogy you want to use there, it's so good. Go read that, because until you understand a problem, it's very, very difficult to determine the best way to fix that problem. Anyway, that is all I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the new Mothership, and I'll see you on the next episode.